Well, Universal Peace Federation, and I have the privilege of chairing the UK branch, has been around from a long time when it was first set up by Father Moon and Hak Jahan Moon, now his widow, and it's achieved a great deal. It's naturally concentrated on the divisions in the Korean Peninsula and the need for reunification of Korea, but also looking at other points of conflict and dissension in the world and trying to find ways to peace, furthering the very good example of Father Moon about reconciliation and bringing people together. And we stand very firmly in the belief that you cannot have peace and reconciliation without dialogue. You have to talk to people, even if you may find what they're doing offensive and repulsive, you still have to talk to them. And it's extraordinary, really, that here we are, 25 years after the signing of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement in 1998. That is what we're concentrating on at the moment, the way in which people were able to talk. And we know now, although it was not apparent at the time, that the John Major government, the Conservative government of the time in Britain, that had said quite categorically that we do not talk to terrorists, nevertheless, behind the scenes, underneath the radar, was talking to the Provisional IRA and Sinn Féin. And it was that largely that led to the understanding that came about as and was encompassed in the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, which was an enormous achievement. I mean, it involved not only the governments of the United Kingdom and the Irish Republic, but also, obviously, the political parties in Northern Ireland. It was subject to referenda, both in Northern Ireland and in the Irish Republic. It required constitutional change, both in the Republic of Ireland, which renounced its claim to have authority over the whole of Ireland, including Northern Ireland. It meant that the British government renounced legislation which had led to the partition of Ireland and the irrevocability of Northern Ireland remaining always part of the United Kingdom. So there was a lot of compromise, a lot of concessions made, and now we are trying to achieve a degree of reconciliation. I have closely observed the situation in Northern Ireland for the last 40 years. My first visit here was in the early 1980s, right in the middle of the Troubles, and I was shocked to see what was happening here in part of what, after all, was my own country, visiting the police and the army barracks and the blocks, which were sandbagged from floor to ceiling with netting over the top to stop projectiles getting in there, with armed people going around, armed soldiers going around trying to keep the peace. And there were atrocities committed on both sides. And sadly, now there are still many people who do not know what happened during those troubles to their loved ones. When I was at Oxford University, I knew Robert Nairac, the young British officer who was abducted from a pub, tortured and then murdered, and his parents went to their graves not knowing where his body lies. And that is true of so many people who do not know really what happened to their loved ones. So we're now into a period of trying to achieve reconciliation. A similar thing to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa is being set up, whereby people are encouraged to come forward and bring evidence as to what happened. So hopefully that will lead to more of those unanswered questions being answered. But also, although it would be wrong and offensive to claim that real good can come out of tragedy, and the Troubles were with us for a very long time, and thousands of people, mostly civilians, were killed during that time, it is true that there are certain acts of reconciliation which augur very well for the future. I'm thinking particularly in 1984, I was present in Brighton when the bomb planted by Patrick Magee went off and killed one of my parliamentary colleagues, Anthony Berry. Now, his daughter, Jo, rather than seeking retribution or engaging in hatred, which would have been perfectly justifiable, when Patrick Magee was released from prison after serving 14 years, she sought him out. And now they go around together speaking about reconciliation, about peace. Another person who was seriously injured in the Brighton bomb, Harvey Thomas, who was one of Margaret Thatcher's closest advisors, actually sought out Patrick Magee and invited him to his home on many occasions. They became friends. It was his Christian belief that he said drove him to the act of forgiveness and reconciliation. Now, these are just a couple of examples, but there are many more where people have found it possible to actually think rather than backwards, to think forwards, to look to the future, to look how are they going to lead their lives with people who were engaged in a very dramatic way on both sides of the argument and the fighting during that period of the Troubles. And that augurs extremely well for the future. It means that it is possible, through dialogue, through reconciliation, through individual acts of forgiveness, which have to be personal acts. They cannot be imposed by the community or by statute. But by those acts, we can actually find a way forward. And I know that the Northern Ireland solution is now being studied by other areas of conflict around the world as a model, as a way to go forward, just as the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa also proved to be a model. And it is so much in line with the philosophy of the Universal Peace Federation, the way in which that peace was achieved, that I believe we can use these examples, we can pray them in aid, we can call upon them to actually show that the world does not have to live in conflict, that people of very different cultures, backgrounds and religions can live in harmony and peace together, if only there is the political will. And that is why I'm so proud to be part of the Universal Peace Federation, because it is for that that the Universal Peace Federation stands.